Okay, thanks very much, Jennifer, for the introduction. Yeah, we're just here sharing an office, as Jennifer mentioned, had a couple of technical concerns, but then, it's kind of nice that we're both here together in one office. So yeah, we're here to talk to you today about this application for a rezoning at 422 6th Street to convert that building you see up there on the screen, the existing office building for supportive housing uses. Yeah, just here we're going to give you a bit of a presentation, a little bit of background on what the rezoning is, how we got here. John's going to talk to you a little bit about the use generally and what supportive housing is, how it is different from other types of uses that some people think is similar, such as emergency shelters and such. And then, yeah, just close up with where we're going to go on next steps. And then, yeah, try to answer as many of those questions that we hope to see coming in. We're here to answer your questions, and yeah, facilitate a little bit of dialogue about what the process is and what this project is. Yeah, go ahead. Next slide, please. So again, my name is Damien Ritter. I'm the manager of development planning here. So my role is really in the regulatory side of things. How do we permit this use on this property? So we do have a rezoning application that has been forwarded to us from the Lower Mainland Purpose Society, which would allow us to convert the top 2 floors of that existing building you saw previously for supportive housing. So the rezoning application itself deals with the fact that supportive housing is a specific use in our zoning bylaws. So zoning bylaws tell you what kind of uses you can do on different types of properties. And the zoning on this property does allow residential, but supportive housing we've specifically defined in our zoning bylaw. So this rezoning would then allow that use to exist on those top 2 floors. So the presentation, as mentioned, will provide you a little bit more information on what that use is, what our needs are that we've already identified for supportive housing within New Westminster, how it aligns with our city policies, and why staff have recommended supporting this project, the types of public inquiries and FAQs that we have received through our engagement on this process, and some potential tools that we have come up with that might help us mitigate the types of impacts that we've heard that are a concern in the community. Next slide, please. So yeah, as I mentioned, the property is currently zoned for at community commercial districts, high rise, C3, C3A zoning. It's what how it's defined. And so yeah, as I mentioned, housing is permitted above the 1st floor in the existing zoning, but supportive housing is a specific use. So we're here the rezoning will then allow that use. It just allows one additional use on this property above what's permitted today. And so we'll be using techies out there will be using comprehensive development zoning in order to do that, which would permit the use, and also would permit us to use communal bathrooms and kitchens, which is something that we've heard from the funder, as well as the nonprofit is going to be necessary to make this a viable project. So I'll pass this over to my office mate here, John, who's going to walk you through some of what that supportive housing use is.
Yes, so John Stark, Supervisor Community Planning. I'm going to run, there's quite a few slides. I'll run through it quite quickly, but that definitely there will be time for questions, which I think is really important with regards to clarification. So with regards to what this proposal is, with regards to supportive housing, with regards to who it'll be serving, it'll be low individuals with low incomes and who have experienced or at risk of homelessness. It is not serving people with active addictions. So that is the primary residents who will be here. The purpose is to assist with successful tenancy and really to provide supports to enable these residents to transition to more independent living. Some of the supports that will be provided will be budgeting, life skills, counseling and health, education, employment readiness, nutrition and meal preparation, and community connections and referral. And with regard to residents, they'll, as part of the expectation, they will be engaged in day programs and support. So there is an expectation that they will be actively engaged in such programs. And with regards to supports, they can be on-site or they can be in-reach services, in which services are coming to the building, or they could be referrals to community-based services. Around eligibility, there'll be an intake and assessment process. And this will really look at receptivity to live in a communal setting, and as noted, to engage in supports. There'll be other expectations, and they'll sign a commitment as to those expectations. And with regards to the individuals themselves, they'll have a previous relationship with a social service provider. Any issues that they have will be in a managed state, and they will be seen as being stable and able to live as independently as possible with some supports. Next slide, please. As part of the survey on Be Heard New West, we heard that some people, well, a number of people referred to this as an emergency shelter, and we didn't want to highlight the differences between supportive housing and an emergency shelter. So with regards to supportive housing, in this case, it is for a year, potentially longer with regards to placements. And sometimes supportive housing can be permanent, as opposed to an emergency shelter. It's during extreme weather, nightly or 24/7. So we can see this as temporary. With regards to eligibility, as noted, supportive housing, there is an intake and assessment process. And with regards to emergency shelter, often it's on a first come, first served basis. As for the services, as noted, there are a range of services offered in this supportive housing proposal, as opposed to an emergency shelter where there are limited and no support services. And with regards to the accommodation, these will be individual units, as opposed to an emergency shelter, which are often dorm or shared bedroom arrangements. Next slide, please. We also heard as part of the survey in Be Heard New West is that this potential supportive housing proposal may serve people with active addictions. And some people refer to it as an overdose prevention or supervised consumption site. And I just wanted to highlight some of the differences. So with regards to use of supportive housing, that's a residential use. And when we look at an overdose prevention site or a supervised consumption site, it is a harm reduction service. So it's really serving people who are active in their addiction and reducing the harm of overdose or death. With regard to the people and their condition who will be using it, as noted in supportive housing, people will be in a stable state. Any issues will be in a managed place, and they are not to be addicted. As opposed to an overdose prevention site, these are people, as noted, who are actively addicted. As for supports, the expectation in supportive housing is that the engagement supports around an OPS or SCS, they're not required to engage supports. And with regards to services, the supportive housing, the service will only serve building residents, as opposed to the overdose prevention site, the supervised consumption site that serves the larger community. Next slide. With regards to community need, the city completed a housing needs report in 2021. In fact, the province mandates that all municipalities develop such reports. It looks at the whole continuum of housing based on needs, and those needs are calculated between 2021 and 2031. Based on this report, it was determined that there is a need for 358 supportive housing units during this time period. I should say that BC Housing is moving away from funding emergency shelter to funding more supportive housing and providing long-term stable housing in which to make changes. We currently have 52 units of supportive housing, which is under review and to be developed at 68 6th Street. Given that 358 number, this would represent 14.5% of the needed total. With regards to 422 6th Street, that's up to 30 units. And if it is, if the rezoning is approved by council, that would make up 8.4% of that needed total during that time period. As such, there are 82 units which are being developed or proposed, and that would leave a deficit of 276 units or 77.1% in a much smaller window, because we're now in 2023. And just with regards to the 52 units, they're not expected to achieve occupancy until late 2024 or early 2025. And we have no other supportive housing units being proposed at this time. Next slide, please. With regards to policy alignment, Council just recently completed its 2023-2026 Strategic Priorities Plan, and that really directs staff with regards to what are the priorities of Council. With regards to this particular supportive housing development, it addresses two of the sub areas, homes and housing options. More specifically, with regards to the objectives under that area, focus intergovernmental collaboration on the creation of homes. And here we see that CMHC is providing $5.35 million towards this for the capital costs, and BC Housing is committing to fund 20 years with regards to operational costs. So here we see it is intergovernmental collaboration. With regards to the other objective, providing supports to keep people housed. This is supportive housing, comes with a range of supports which will enable people to maintain their housing and transition to more independent housing. With regards to another area of strategic area, it's community belonging and connecting. And this is all about how people belong to their community and how they identify with others. It also talks about acceptance and being supported and having a sense of community. And here we can see that with regards to this particular goal, the idea is to integrate these individuals into a community. This particular development is just borders the Brow of the Hill neighborhood, so it is near an established residential neighborhood. So this being important with regards to integrating these individuals and ensuring that they do feel a sense of belonging into that community. Next slide, please. There was public feedback and inquiries. There were 292 survey responses on the Be Heard New West, and we have had emails, phone calls, and other correspondence. I just wanted to quickly summarize some of the feedback. So with regards to this particular development, it was seen as meeting a community need. Several people also said that it's important to have supportive housing throughout the entire city and not just in the downtown. It makes a difference in the lives of building residents. This was seen as important housing because it does provide supports to enable people to transition to more independent housing and also around successful tenancies. A number of people did say there's a need to address potential negative externalities, and we'll talk about two potential mechanisms, which is a good neighbor agreement and a community advisory committee. There was references to this being a shelter overdose prevention or supervised consumption site, and I addressed that in the two previous slides. With regards to concerns, we had respondents who stated that this may contribute to crime, drug use, and homelessness. And there was also concerns that it may negatively impact businesses and also property values. Next slide. With regards to, one back, Jennifer. Based on all of the questions that we've received, we have been updating our frequently asked questions, which come with responses. We've also been responding to emails and phone calls. Just with regards to what you may find on that Be Heard New West webpage is what is the intake and assessment process, more specifics around that. How would the residents be staffed? And just on that note, because it's not addressed here, there would be 4 staff during the day, 2 staff at night. So just it would have 24/7 staffing, and one of the staff members at night would be a mental health support worker. What types of supports will be offered? I went through that, but there is more information. What are the differences between the housing proposed and the nightly shelter on Front Street? There is information around that. Some people have stated that the nightly shelter on Front Street is having some issues, but that seems to be, that is more with the model, the fact that it only operates from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. and those individuals, 50 individuals are let out in the morning. Will residents be able to smoke cigarettes? As noted, you cannot consume illicit drugs, but there will be a designated area in the parking lot with regard, and we'll have privacy fencing for that for people to smoke cigarettes. And then what is the role of supportive housing addressing homelessness? There are many more questions which have been raised and responses, so I encourage you to go onto that site. And next slide. With regards to potential tools to mitigate neighborhood impacts, we have heard from community members, and we have some experience within the city with regards to good neighbor agreements. The Union Gospel Mission has a good neighbor agreement, and it's been quite successful in dealing with issues. A good neighbor agreement talks about expectations on behalf of the operator and how they integrate into the community and address issues. So it's important in creating a healthy, inclusive, and safe neighborhood that the operator is part of discussions around that. Working together on neighborhood initiatives which enhance livability, trying to get residents involved in their community and volunteer and make a difference. Sharing honest, open, and respectful and two-way communication. Nearby businesses and residents will have contact information for the operator. And the whole idea is that they will be able to contact that operator if there are concerns and get a response. The operator will also be part of the proposed community advisory committee. And really importantly, resolving concerns and issues as they arise, being proactive, not letting concerns get more problematic. Around the community advisory committee, we've used this twice in New Westminster. We have a community advisory committee for the Health Contact Center in the downtown. And that committee has been quite successful in involving residents and addressing issues before they become problematic. We also have a community advisory committee for Mazarine Lodge, which is operated by the Elizabeth Fry Society. And this is 44 units of supportive housing in Queensborough. And as noted, that is a supportive housing residence. So it is definitely applicable with regards to this specific proposal. Around the community advisory committee, it would have a membership that would involve local businesses, local residents, and also with regards to the operator, the city, funders, and others. So the whole idea is to bring groups together so they can communicate and share information. It does build and maintain positive relations. It's there to facilitate collaboration, information sharing as stated. The whole idea, one of the things it also does is identify opportunities to welcome and involve clients or guests in the community, again around that belonging and connecting, and resolving issues related to management and operations. So really being proactive in hearing and addressing issues with businesses and residents in that manner. And I think I'm going to turn it, next slide. And I'm going to turn it back over to Damien for this slide.
Yeah, thanks very much, John. A lot of information there. Hopefully that helped clarify some things that we've heard. So back to what our next steps are from a city approval perspective. So as I mentioned, we've got these applicants come to us with this application, and they have applied for CMHC funding, which would fund the capital actual conversion of this building from an office use on the second and third floors to supportive housing. So that's be about $5.3 million for that. But in order to get that in place, we needed to have a little bit of an expedited timeline because they need to have it in place by the beginning of July. Now, I said that we did a little bit of an expedited timeline, but we did still all follow all the steps in our typical process. And in fact, we're going a little bit beyond that with this session here, as well as we had an in-person session earlier this evening to hear a little bit of feedback from the community so the council can make a decision on this matter. So overall of how we got here, we had a preliminary report to council on May 8th. And we proceeded with some city-led consultation, which included the Be Heard webpage, which John mentioned, as well as a survey where we had almost 300 responses. And we then followed it up with a staff letter to residents and businesses addressing some of the things that we'd been hearing. We then brought forward the comprehensive report to council on May 29th that had a staff presentation. And council asked us to have these dialogue sessions with the community to get a little bit more feedback and hear some of your questions. And then we would be considering to bring this forward back to council with a report on what we heard in these consultation sessions, as well as for them to consider first, second, and third readings of the bylaw to permit the use. And that would be on June 26th. And that, I believe, concludes our presentation. Thanks very much for bearing with us. A lot of information there. I see that we're getting some questions in, but I'll turn it over to Jennifer in order to help facilitate that discussion.
Great, thanks so much for the presentation, John and Damien. For those who have joined since we got started, just wanted to let you know how we're taking questions this evening. So you want to look for the Q&A icon in your Zoom menu and just click on that, and you can type in your questions for John and Damien here. And the rest of our time together until about 9 o'clock is dedicated to answering your questions. So we'll jump in here thanks to a couple of folks who've been quite active in the question tool already, and we'll start answering those questions just momentarily. I also just wanted to remind everyone that we're recording this session, and we will post the recording on the Be Heard page. So if there's anyone you know who wasn't able to make it tonight, they can tune in or watch and get some more information. And also just want to acknowledge again that we have a few members of council who are here listening as well. Mayor Patrick Johnstone, Councillor Ruby Campbell, and Councillor Tasha Henderson are all here listening. With that, I'm going to get into the questions. So our first question here is from Johnny. Thanks so much for the question, Johnny. Johnny writes, Premier Eby says SROs are not fit housing and should be replaced with dignified options, adding they can no longer be part of the solution for those experiencing homelessness. Why are we not pushing for a more dignified option with this project?
So I'll answer the question, Johnny, and thank you for the question. I should start off with regards to, this is transitional housing, so this is not permanent supportive housing. It will be available for up to a year. With regards to, they will be individualized units, but I think you're referring to the fact that there will be shared bathrooms and kitchens. This was a discussion between the applicant and the funder with regards to trying to maximize the number of units, being 28, also ensuring that with regards to staffing, that those, I guess, the number of units can justify the level of staffing and supports. And also it is an older building, so there are limitations with regards to trying to provide, I guess, bathrooms in each of the units. So there was a lot of discussion around that. I think the main point here is that this is not permanent supportive housing, but this is really transitional for up to a year. And, you know, they had to balance a lot of different considerations with regards to coming up with that decision. So I just want to let you know that it was, there was a lot of thought put into that, but it's the only way they can maximize the number of units and also with regards to staffing and supports. But it, you know, I still think there is many benefits for the residents who will be there for up to a year.
Yeah, I think maybe just to add to that a little bit, and just a more, yeah, I think one of the key differences, as we mentioned, this is, you know, it's being done by a nonprofit society. Some SROs run by nonprofits, but this is a really comprehensive model here with all the supports that, like, half the building would be involved in sports and office administration. So a little bit different than a typical SRO that you might find. So that might be part of that as well.
Great, thanks for that. All right, next question here is from Trevor. Thanks for the question, Trevor. What are the parameters for advertising public engagement? And Trevor says he only just found out about this session. We're glad you did find out and that you're here, Trevor. So what are the parameters for advertising sessions like this?
Yeah, well, with regards to, you know, with general for public engagement for these types of rezoning applications, we do go beyond what the Local Government Act requires, which is generally just 100 feet around our for notification. We go quite a bit beyond that. You know, there's a number of processes that we've had involved in this to get to this point, including sending out you know, notices about this meeting, notices about how we will not be holding a public hearing in this matter, which is something that we have to tell everybody about. People can then still submit questions. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole advertising in the newspaper as well. There's a number of pieces that we have to do. It's not perfect. There's no way this can always tell everybody about every project, but we do our best to go beyond the requirements that the provincial government requires for notification. About this session specifically, we did do a number of additional reach out, and this session that we're doing is actually quite a bit beyond a typical process for a local government. Usually there would not be a process like this. This is something that council, having heard some things from the community, wanted us to go out and reach out a little bit further. So that's what we're doing here tonight, and we can't reach everybody, but we're trying our best to reach as many people as we can.
All right, next question here is from Johnny. Given this is the first time Purpose Society is undertaking such a project, what is the recourse if they are not being a good neighbor?
So I just wanted to say Purpose Society offers a lot of services within U.S. This would be the first time with regards to supportive housing, but they have a health van, they operate the New Westminster Rent Bank, an identification clinic, local immigration partnership council in which they coordinate. They operate childcares, which is unrelated to this specific proposal. But I just wanted to let you know that they operate an array of services, including the peers. They're involved in these types of services. With regards to this specific, it is being recommended by staff, and it has been discussed in the previous session around a good neighbor agreement, which would be signed between Purpose Society in the city. Also, we're looking at a community advisory committee in which they would be involved and the community could ask questions. And also with regards to the good neighbor agreement, if there are concerns and are not resolved either through the good neighbor agreement or the community advisory committee, they can be brought to the attention of city council. Also, there is a 20-year operating agreement with BC Housing, and they also have their expectations. So I believe there's a number of checks and balances with regards to this particular proposal. And also, I believe there's a question coming up with regards to supportive housing. This type of housing, given it is longer term housing and there is an intake and assessment process, it tends to have less issues than, say, a minimal barrier shelter or an extreme weather response shelter.
Thank you. Next question here is from Trevor. There's a couple questions here, so I'll read them both, but if you need me to repeat, please let me know. What can be said about the type of people that would be housed here? What can be said to the crime issues experienced in the Carnarvon Street area and prevention of that on 6th Street or near this development?
At our previous session, we did have a representative from BC Housing, and with regards to supportive housing, and just for the reasons stated, there is an intake and assessment process. This is longer term housing. These people have individual units. Issues that there are meals provided. They're given, like I said, a whole range of supports. So typically we would not see issues that may be associated with other potential services. So really, and I can speak to this a little later with regards to some of our experiences with other supportive housing projects. So I really don't think there is a connection or with regards to supportive housing and an increase in crime or concerns around public safety.
Yeah, just to add a little more in terms of, we don't know necessarily who is going to be living here. It's a question about the type of people. I think John mentioned that a little bit about how people that are wanting to transition over into more independent living, and that's kind of the types of folks that they are looking for. But it's housing for people that need housing, and at the end of the day, that's what we're trying to provide. I think that one other thing that I would add is that the nonprofit would generally be looking to house people that are at risk or experiencing homelessness who are in New Westminster. So try to help the people that are in our city right
Great, thanks. I've just noticed that we have a new person in the session. So just want to let you know that we're taking questions using the Q&A tool. So you want to find that Q&A icon in your Zoom menu. You can click that and it'll open up a box and you can type in your questions for us through that. Next question here is from Trevor. Will there be anything that prevents active drug use on site or near the site?
So Trevor, with regards to this has been raised and we've had a discussion with the nonprofit. As stated, this is not intended for people who are active in their addiction. With regards to individuals who would be eligible for this housing, if they had an addiction, previous addiction, it would have to be in a managed state. If for some reason they relapse, staff will try to support them, but if it can't be addressed on site, they will look at another housing option, perhaps a shelter, or a referral to a recovery or treatment program. If their addiction is in a managed state, they may be eligible to be rehoused. With regards to people who are actively using, this is under the Residential Tenancy Act. They can terminate tenancies, and that would be clear to the individuals who are coming into the housing. So it is not intended for that purpose. If they become aware of someone who's actively using illicit drugs, they will address it through those means. Like as noted, if they become aware of a resident there, either through a community or through a staff member, that will be the course of action that will be taken.
All right, next question here from Johnny. As part of promoting this project, the city made reference to the Elizabeth Fry operated transitional housing in Queensborough. So I'll just add here that we're talking about the Mazarine Lodge housing as a success story. However, this is a women's only facility, which has in-suite facilities such as washrooms and a kitchenette, which is not comparative. Do we have any similar type of facilities that would be a better comparison?
So just to let you know, with regards to that was a purpose designed facility at Mazarine Lodge, as opposed to this, which is a conversion, which does present some challenges. I will say that Lookout Housing and Health Society operates two supportive housing, three supportive housing, but I can give you two examples. The Rhoda-Kayla residence, which is at Stewardson Way and 6th, or Royal Avenue, Stewardson and Royal. That's 23 units of supportive housing. It predominantly serves men. I will say we rarely hear it. It's one of those housing developments that people don't know it's there, and that's a good thing. That means there's not issues arising from it. But like I said, that predominantly serves men. It can serve women too. And that's 23 units of supportive housing operated by Lookout. The other one is the Cliff Block, which is 24 units of supportive housing. And that's where, I guess it's where the Starbucks used to be on 6th and Columbia Street, just up from there and bordering on Clarkson. And again, this is supportive housing predominantly for men, but housing that we get few complaints and that seamlessly is fit within the community. So those would be two examples of supportive housing that's predominantly serving men as opposed to women, and that is proven because it's been Cliff Block's been there before I came to the city, was 16 years ago, and with regards to the Rhoda-Kayla residence, we're looking about 2010, 2011. So very few, if any, issues with regards to those two residences.
John, this person specifically is talking about the suites having their own washrooms and kitchenette. Are you able to speak to any examples where
with regards to the Rhoda-Kaylas, they do. I think there are a really small, like a cooktop, no oven, and a small bar fridge in the units. And they do have a common kitchen because the idea is that people just don't stay in a room, but that they congregate and they learn about food preparation skills. So it is, it does not, I mean, it does have individual bathrooms and a small cooktop and a small bar fridge in the room. But the rooms are quite small, but in the whole idea is that they congregate, and it does have that social aspect to it, but you know, it is somewhat different in both cases.
Yeah, just to maybe add a little bit more, there are, of course, there's also a number of hotels that have been converted. I know of a number of them. A lot of them are in Vancouver, but I know of a couple in Coquitlam where, yeah, they're very, very limited kitchen facilities, if any, in the rooms. Most of them do have individual bathrooms, but yeah, that's another example of sort of a little bit of a smaller scale as opposed to a full complete.
Thanks. All right. Next question here from Johnny. So Johnny's saying that he reviewed the floor plans for this project, and he's seeing 5 units per floor, or 1/3. So a third of the units, or 5 units on each floor, would be tiny rooms without a window. And is that, maybe can you comment, is he reading those plans correctly? Are these rooms without windows? What can we say about this? And you know, again, you know, the question about, is this dignified housing for individuals who are in transition?
Yeah, I can answer that one. Yeah, there is a center area where there are some units which are in the middle of the building, which then of course don't have individual windows out at the outside. But part of the idea of the model here, which sort of touches on some of the earlier questions as well, is to provide more communal living spaces. So there's lounges, there's kitchens areas, there's all the supports that you find downstairs. The rooms all of them are fairly small. They're all around the same size. So the rooms are really intended of where you go to sleep. Is it perfect? You know, in an ideal world, does everyone have a much larger unit with all the facilities in them? Yes, that would be the ideal situation. But as you know, we do have a need to create, as we talked about, all the need that we have in our community for more supportive housing units. And we feel that, and Purpose Society, the federal government, and BC Housing all feel that this is a reasonable approach here. As we also mentioned before, this is also intended to be transitional housing, not permanent places of residence, although some of the where people tend to stay in supportive housing longer term tend to be the larger units. That's not what we anticipate happening here. It's again to get people back on their feet, moving towards more independent living.
Thank you. All right, next question here. I read all of the responses. I think Johnny's referring to the survey on Be Heard. I noted that 33% were in favor, 66% were not in favor, and interpreted many of the comments about the other Purpose facility and the fact that they have not lived up to their commitment. Has the city considered making approval of this project a rectification of other issues with this operator?
So a couple of things here. I reviewed all of the responses too, and there were a number of people who referred to the supportive housing proposal at 422 6th Street as an emergency shelter, which it isn't. A number of other people referred to it serving people with active addictions or similar to an overdose prevention site. So with regards to some of the responses, they were not indicative of the proposed use, but of other uses. With regards to the nightly shelter, I just wanted to provide, and this is the nightly shelter, which is accessed off of Front Street. It's also operated by Purpose Society. Some of the issues with regards to this particular shelter is more to do with the model than I would say with regards to the operator. The current building owner does not want to see this transition to a 24/7 shelter. Plus, it has a lease which expires in November 2025. And there are some concerns from BC Housing's perspective about significant renovations given that limited lease time. With regards to that nightly shelter, we have 50 people who exit at 8 a.m. every morning. Those individuals, if it's inclement weather, may seek refuge in doorways, alcoves. If it's really cold out, they may set fires to keep warm. A lot of them have no place to go, so they're walking the streets. You know, they have difficulty accessing services. Accessing toilets can be an issue too. So a lot of those issues would be addressed with a 24/7 shelter with support services. We are now working with BC Housing to make some changes, and part of that would be a sanitation trailer, which would meet the need for access to toilets and showers, and looking at potentially some more supports there. But that is right now, that's an interim use. It was brought in as an extreme weather response shelter initially with regards to saving people during extreme cold weather, and it has transitioned to a nightly shelter. And as noted, a lot of the issues are more to do with the type of shelter and its limited hours and its lack of support services than with regards to what the operator could do in this case. But it has, given the fact that it operates over winter on a nightly basis, it does provide a significant service with regards to when the temperatures plummet.
Thanks, John. I just want to touch on, maybe Damien, can you weigh in? You know, would the city ever put a conditional approval on something like this application related to, you know, an applicant's other properties? Would that be something?
That's from a city perspective, that's not something that we can do. We can't like really hold someone, a specific applicant, responsible as staff for something that's happening somewhere else. So we have to look at each application on its own merit. We did hear all these concerns, and John's mentioned a number of the ways that these two things are different, but we do have a real need for supportive housing. If you think about the spectrum of housing, we've got the 24/7, like we've got the emergency shelter, which is what we have, and a 24/7 shelter would be the next step. And moving towards having more of these options will help to reduce externalities in neighborhoods. That's the way that maybe they might be related as well.
Great, thanks for that. I see a couple of folks have joined our session just in the last few minutes. So we have about 7 or 8 minutes left for questions. We are scheduled to be here until 9. So if you do have questions for us, click on the Q&A icon in your Zoom menu. Please type those in. I also want to acknowledge that we also have, I've mentioned a couple times, we have some members of council who are here listening, and Councillor Daniel Fontaine has joined the session as well. We also have Mayor Patrick Johnstone, Councillor Ruby Campbell, and Councillor Tasha Henderson. All right, so do get your questions in. The next question here is from Johnny. We have mentioned the deadline for the funding as a reason for pushing this project through without full consultation. Did we discuss with the funders a need for more time to ensure approving the best project possible and not just approving any project?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the question, Johnny. Appreciate your good questions tonight. Yeah, to be clear, we are doing full consultation. We're doing all of our typical process that we normally do. We're just really to make it simple, we're basically putting more staff resources towards this one because of the need to get it through quickly. So, we still had our initial report to council. We still had a public consultation session. We allowed people to delegate to council as well, make those opinions heard. Our council has actually asked us to go above and beyond our typical consultation requirements, which is what we're doing this evening, to have an additional dialogue session with both online and the one that we had earlier tonight over in Century House in person. So we are doing all of the process that we do need to do. It's a little bit compressed, but every piece of the puzzle is, including the amount of time that we have the flyers that go out to the community, all the advertising, all of the postcards. We're doing all of the process that we typically do. We're just trying to move it to meet that deadline. So we're trying to move it quickly, but still having all the steps in place.
Thank you. Next question is from Johnny as well. Follow up to my prior question. You said that if there are issues, they could be brought to council, but you didn't specify what their powers would be if the operators are not meeting their commitments to the community. So I think it's a follow-up question about, what action could be taken if the good neighbor agreement is not being followed.
So just on that note, a good neighbor agreement is a voluntary agreement between the nonprofit and the city. It does set out a lot of expectations with regards to the nonprofit. With regards to staff, we work closely with nonprofits. If we see issues, we would meet with the nonprofit. We would try to address those issues with them. The Community Advisory Committee has an important role to play with regards to also addressing issues and sharing information. I think what was stated there was with regards to, I think everyone nonprofit would want to be a good neighbor and part of the community. And if there are issues that persist, staff could bring I'm sure the community would bring those forth to council, but staff could also alert council as to issues, and staff could also look at what we can do as staff with regards to, are there bylaw infractions that do we have people who are occupying sidewalks? Are there other issues? We would look from a staffing perspective and potentially get direction of how we can work with that nonprofit to address those issues. Hopefully with regards to the Good Neighbor Agreement and Community Advisory Committee, and also the type of housing which is being proposed here, these will not be issues.
Thank you. So we've got a new question here from Johnny that is a little bit different. So I'm going to go to that one because the other one is a little bit of a repeat. You said you've been following all the normal steps. Does the city typically waive holding a public hearing? Maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, that's a pretty easy one. Yes, this has been the city's typical process for some time. What we do instead, typically, of holding public hearings, council does make the decision always to whether or not to not hold a public hearing. But we've heard from our council quite a bit about a public hearing is a bit of a time when you can just sort of make your opinions known, and it's not really a dialogue-based approach. So what we do is that we do have consultation that other cities don't necessarily have. So a lot of places don't have. I've been in the city for 8 months, and where I came from does not have something like Be Heard, does not have sort of surveys where we can summarize the opinion that we hear and have some questions, and then be able to present that to council, as opposed to just a few people that come out to a public hearing. So the short answer is yes, it is typical that our council does choose to not hold public hearings on rezoning applications of all types.
Great, thank you. All right, we'll take the last question here from Johnny, and then we'll wrap up the session. Would prior experience with an applicant not be part of the consideration when approving something like this?
And I did state previously that Purpose Society operates a lot of different programs in New Westminster with regards to Purpose Independent School, an ID clinic, the Health Contact Center overdose prevention site, a number of child cares. They've proven, they also with regards to our local immigration partnership council. So a lot of different programs in respects are a good operator, and they are involved on community committees like Kids New West and the local immigration partnership council. And as noted with regards, I think the reference is with regards to the nightly shelter, and I outlined some of the limitations around the nightly shelter with regards to the model, not necessarily the operator. If it was a 24/7 shelter with support services, a lot of these issues that are happening in and around the nightly shelter would not be issues. So I think I've addressed that in that previous question.
Great, thank you. All right, let's go to our next and last slide. And I'll ask Damien just to provide a little bit of information on what our next steps are. And then we'll thank you very much for being here, and wish you a good evening.
Yeah, thanks a lot. So yeah, just to close out, we will be having a recording of this available on the Be Heard page. And then what we're going to do is we're going to write a little bit of a summary of what we heard, some of the questions that we heard, some of the dialogue that we heard earlier this evening in the in-person session. And we would also post that to the Be Heard page. And then we would likely include that, well, we would include that in a report that we're going to be sending to council on June 26th, where we would talk about these dialogue sessions that we had, what we heard, and recommend likely first, second, and third readings for their consideration. So that meeting would be on the 26th. It starts at 6 p.m. and it's open online if you want to watch online, or if you want to attend in person, those are available to you.
Great. Thanks very much for the information on next steps, Damien, and thank you all for being here with us this evening. We wish you a good evening and take care. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.